Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Jams and Tea Podcast, where we spin the jams and we spill the tea. And today, it is the biggest tea spilling of the year as we talk about the worst albums of 2023. We have done this every year since the start of this podcast, where we take the month of December to round up a bit of a retrospective and look at how this year has been for music by examining the highlights and, of course, the lowlights that we have suffered through for your amusement. And let me just say, we have a hell of an assortment to talk about today. And I think that as we do every year, looking back, 2023, a great year for music, no doubt. But in comparison to the years that we've had so far this decade, I would say that some of the good stuff has been the best it's been since we started reviewing music on here. And some of the bad stuff, conversely, is some of the worst and just most questionable that we've reviewed. So, gonna have some fun.
Yes, absolutely. So how this is going to work is Jake and I have both picked 5 records. We're going to count them down in alternating order. Morgan's also here mainly for the shits and gigs.
Morgan is here because he is smart and listens to Riley and I when we say, hey, this album is bad, don't listen to it. And then he doesn't.
I'm the anti-hype man.
But Morgan will be at a crucial moment in the narrative contributing for great effect. So let's not pussyfoot around here. We've got some pretty atrocious records to get through and some pretty complicated thoughts to express. So Jake, why don't you lead us off with your number 5 worst album of 2023?
I guess it's fitting that I kick off the start of this list with by far my list's longest entry. And that is, of course, the latest pile of slop from Morgan Wallen, One Thing at a Time, which...
That's a really funny thing to call your 36-song album.
I mean, that's what I was thinking.
Not as funny of a title as Dangerous, the double album.
I would respect whatever the triple album more than One Thing at a Time. This stupid-ass ponderous
how weirdly
title.
Threatening his titles are to the prospect of listening to those records. Dangerous, double album, One Thing at a Time.
I love how this is his Apple Music picture now.
I've 100% been sent a picture of his dick on Grindr. That guy cool. In that photo.
He's like, he went from like mildly bad boy country figure to selling you chicken feed at Bass
Tractor
Pro Shop
Supply
or something.
Co.
I don't know. Yeah, that one.
And Riley and Morgan have unwittingly gotten to the core of the problem with One Thing at a Time, in that the haphazard approach to naming the image of Morgan Wallen itself, it displays a fundamental lack of consistency when it comes to Morgan's artistic vision. And here's the thing with Morgan Wallen is that he's country music, modern country music, which is, very big now, especially had a big year this year. He is country music's answer to Drake, where he is just going to shove out as much material as humanly possible, make it as palatable as possible. And it doesn't matter necessarily as to whether or not it's good, whether or not it coheres, whether or not it's this, whether or not it's that. It is just content. It's not music. I'm not trying to be like diminish the artistic approach, because the thing is that a lot of the singular songs on here are okay. Some of them are thoughtfully constructed. Some of them have, catchy hooks or specific verses that actually get at something. But when you pile all of this together, it's just minute after minute and verse after verse of I'm drinking and my girl done left me tearing my beer, boo-hoo.
Born with a beer in my hand is legit one of my favorite song titles of the year, just because of that.
Hell yeah, brother.
There's a beer in the sonogram.
Overall, though, it showcases a fundamental lack of understanding in how to create the album as a format. And frankly, that's kind of the worst thing about this, is because, you know, here at the Jams and Tea podcast, we are appreciators, fans of the album format as an art form specifically. And when stuff like this comes out, it's hard not to take it at least a little bit personally, because it is actively diminishing that art form. It is taking its components and using them and optimizing them for streaming numbers. Like, I don't believe that Morgan Wallen cranked this out, controversies aside, for any other reason than being relevant, staying on the charts, just because he is mimicking the idea of the soulful balladeer, but, you know, with his absolutely intolerable vocal presence on this entire album. This is a dude who would be just fine if they did not pay attention to how his voice sounds in post. But they take it and they auto-tune it slightly, they make it squeaky clean, and they insert it into all these songs, and it sounds fucking horrible. Just awful. I mean, you have this, he has a perfect voice for what he's doing. I don't love it or anything, but this is what a lot of guys in country music sound like. And with all of these effects on there, it just creates this slimy presence that you just want nothing to do with, let alone spend 2 hours with, singing about the same monotonous, repetitive bullshit. It's just that every way other than the fact that these are songs that are constructed like songs, this album is a failure.
Well, and I think, to be fair to Morgan Wallen, and this is just my inherent tendency to be a devil's advocate kind of thing, what I would say with regard to the format thing of it being, you know, a 36 song album that, you know, devalues the album format, I think there's some truth to that. But we also have to acknowledge that we currently exist in a music industry ecosystem where that format of releasing music in this way, of stacking your album with as many songs as possible, is incentivized and rewarded and kind of cultivated by the system that artists like Morgan exist in. It's a shame, and it's not something that excuses the poor quality of the album, especially when you look at someone like Zach Bryan, who released an album of similar length last year, which was great. And so managed to, like, had the skill, had the talent, and had the tenacity to kind of put himself into that, to be able to, you know, to make a great record that was, you know, over 2 hours long. So it is, you know, it's a shame that we live in a system, you know, in a music business system that does inherently devalue the album as an art form, or at the very least, like, is changing what it is in a way that makes it kind of hard to figure out what albums should be, what albums are going to be going forward. It's awkward and weird and annoying. And of course, the bottom line is the songs aren't there either. So it's a shame. My number 5 pick today is one of the biggest rock bands in the world, one of the most popular rock bands in the world, a staple of a particular sound in modern rock production, and just in terms of modern rock bands that I like to call Spotify rock specifically. And if you know, you know, it's this particular sound, it's this particular style, it's this particular personality that just bleeds and screams the streaming era in particular. And while we were talking about Morgan Wallen, we're talking about how the streaming era begets this unwieldy, you know, listless fashion and album construction. That's true to an extent with this Måneskin album that I'm going to be talking about. But really, what's more, you know, streaming core, Spotify core about it is just this ridiculous playlist ready slickness that it has that saps it of all personality. And, you know, to the credit of Måneskin, they do try to put some personality back into their music. It just often ends up being really asinine, really condescending, really. Uh, it's really hard to pull off cocky arrogance in a way that's endearing. You know, a lot of rappers, that's a big thing and a big aspect of building a persona, right? Is braggadocio, you know, confidence and that sense of achievement that comes through from that. it's really awkward and strange when people in the rock world try to do that as well. When rock stars or wannabes or whatever try to do that. And that's one of the things that makes Måneskin's songwriting and just the general personality of this band and its frontman and everything about it so off-putting. Måneskin, if you don't know, are an Italian rock band. They've actually been around the block a while. They have a minor, which then became very major hit with a cover of Beggin'. I think that was last year that blew up. But then their new album Rush came out in January. I mean, look, bad is relative, right? And what I mean by that is that this is not the worst album I'm going to be talking about. Obviously, it's my lowest ranked one, but it's also an album that I think has some good qualities. I think you can tell that Måneskin are a fairly practiced band, and there are a couple of really catchy songs on here that I enjoy. Like Baby Said, for instance, is really catchy and doesn't make me want to kind of blow my brains out. But why I think this is one of the worst albums of the year, again, comes back to the idea that bad is relative in the sense that this is not one of the worst albums experiences I've had, but relative to how big this band are, how hugely successful and beloved and popular they are, we need to be doing so much better as a culture than hoisting up fucking Måneskin of all bands. It is a series of awkward, non sequitur innuendos that don't land, really thuddingly repetitive and dull guitar parts that feel absolutely copied in from, the template of guitar sounds and stomping grooves and sanitized, sterilized shit that we get fed through a tube on Spotify playlists all the time, to the extent that there's even a Tom Morello guitar feature on this record. And I swear to God, if you didn't have his name plastered on as a feature, you would not know he was playing on it. The whole production is so dry, it's so lifeless, that the guitar playing of Tom fucking Morello, of all people, is virtually indistinguishable from any other aspect of the song. It's truly tragic. So you have some songs where they're doing this kind of tongue-in-cheek, sexualized, hip thing, Spotify core rock. And then you have other songs where, I guess, for lack of better ideas, it's really just the front man of this band being as annoying as possible, like on a song like Blah Blah Blah, where it's literally just 3 minutes of the singer of this band going, ha 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 ha, blah 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 blah. You broke
The
my
fuck
heart, so
up.
I crashed your car. You say you're sorry, well, I bet you are. I hate your face,
We
but I like your mom's. You play
we
it smart,
owe
but you look so
Kesha a
dumb.
formal apology.
I wanna fuck, let's go to my spot. But I can't, I'm too drunk and I can't get hard. That's the worst of it, admittedly. But it's that kind of intonation. It's that kind of like wry, sort of ironic, sarcastic self-seriousness that's like, oh, do you dare to take me seriously? This is just me, expressing myself and my jadedness with how hollow all of our interactions are. It doesn't do much to dissuade the eye-rolling quality you already get from looking at the album cover, where the members of this band are just plastered on the floor staring up the skirt of a leaping cheerleader. And like the whole thing just screams like, we live in a society where women expose themselves because they don't value their bodies.
Our shitty surface level writing is actually super deep. It's a commentary.
And there's so many of these songs are just about how fucking stupid women are. Like, and just how every girl that this guy fucks is basically just like has no ambition and just needs to sort her life out. And I'm like, dude. So there's some of the songs are about women who are like that. Other songs are just about how much he wants to party, like the song "Don't Want to Sleep," where he just kind of sings "Dance, dance, dance until I die. I don't want to sleep at all," like a 5-year-old who's had a Monster Energy drink for the first time.
I can't stop partying,
Partying,
partying.
partying.
I
This is the
can't
shittiest
stop.
party I've ever seen in my life. No, I'm not leaving. I'm going to get my feet on the ceiling. Wearing Lucy's diamonds to get a little shine. Wink if you get that reference, kids. Oh, and the worst song of all is Cool Kids, right? Plastered right in the center of
Mm.
this record. It sounds like Idols, which completely threw me for a loop. It's like all of a sudden this, peppy, bratty, rich kid, punky, Spotify rock band are suddenly like, down tuning their guitars and doing this kind of, post-punky bass sound, and then singing like, honestly, I don't give a fuck. I'm addicted to rock and roll. Beers up.
Do you like rock and roll music?
I'm a
Because I don't
scum, real
know if I
scum, but I'm good at
do.
this. We're not punk, we're not pop, we're just music freaks.
God, this
But
listening to you recite these lyrics makes me want to find like the closest bar in the vicinity and just cover every woman's drink just to be safe.
cool kids, they do not use drugs, only weed because it's not
Oh,
that strong. I'm a bitch and I have much fun, and I like doing things I love.
I was gonna say that this album sounds like it was purely made from cocaine, but now I am convinced that everyone in this band is way too lame to have ever done drugs.
I was gonna say it helps a little when you're reading these off to remember that English is not their first language. But then I remember the existence of a band like Scorpions and how their ridiculous, over the top, weirdly sexual lyric writing was at least fun.
Rock You Like a Hurricane is a banger.
I think that the songwriter of this band has a really strong understanding of English. The thing is, I feel like he's deliberately writing poorly and in bad English because he thinks it's funny and because he thinks he's making some kind of wry observation about the shallowness of rock music. That's the thing, is this album's identity to me feels like it is this baked in satirical wink nudge joke about the shallowness of celebrity life, of being a rock star, all those kinds of things. But it has no like point to make. It has no, end goal with that. It's just like, oh, I'm smart, I'm funny, I'm aware of these things. And it revels in it. And it dares you to criticize it or point at a lyric and say, ha ha, he can't write properly. It's daring you to do that at every single point. And the thing is, like, I'll do that because it's shit. It's not funny. It doesn't work. It's not observational. It's just you're just saying things, man. You just vomiting words. The fucking Mamma Mia song, I swear to God, if you want a taste of this album, listen to the fucking Mamma Mia song. One of the most annoying songs I've heard all year. Oh, because in the context of the album, you've just had a stretch of songs where suddenly the singers decided to sing in their native tongue of Italian. So you've had 3 songs in a row, all Italian lyrics. And then you have Mamma Mia come up, which feels like it's making fun of the fact that it's just had 3 songs in a row that are all in Italian because he's just going Mamma Mia the whole fucking time.
Oh my God.
But he's doing it in his particular intonation that he has where it's like mamma mia, mamma mia, ah, where it sounds like Matt Bellamy with a fucking frog in his throat or something. It's and then all the songs like Mamma Mia is one of these as well, where it's like there's a lot of songs that are about sex in a really kind of like provocative and edgy way. It's like I'm into sex, but I'm into like really dark
I'm a
sex.
sex haver.
I'm into disgusting sex that most girls don't want to have. When he's just repeating
Stop.
over and over again, spit your love on me. I'm on my knees and I can't wait to drink your rain. I'll keep the secret if you let me get
Bro?
a taste.
Bro?
You want to
Homie?
touch my body? I say you're not allowed. You want to handle me, but I'm a bit too much. I'll burn the place down because I'm too fucking hot. They want to arrest me, but I was just having fun. Nothing about this makes you sound like a fun person. It makes you sound like a fucking asshole. And again, I feel like I'm going crazy because it's like the whole time he's like, oh yeah, this is what rock stars are like. Isn't it disgusting how they abuse their privilege? I'm like, dude, you don't get to fucking have your cake and eat it too here. You don't get to be the smarmy, self-indulgent guy who points and laughs at people who think he's being serious, but also get to be someone who is just openly misogynistic. Like, it's not making an observation. It's not a commentary on this. You think it is, but it's not. It's just annoying. I mean, the peak of this album's just vacuous misogyny is on the penultimate song Supermodel as well, which is just a really insulting portrait of like this cliched stereotype of this drugged out woman whose life is going down the drain because she can't quit cocaine. And she was a supermodel in the 90s, and now she's all washed up, and she used to be a good Christian girl, and then she was corrupted. And if you want to be with her, you have to just deal with that because she can't be fixed. And it's like, you are trying so hard. I can tell you're trying so hard to piss me off at this point. And you're doing it, but you're not doing it in the way you think you are. You're just doing it in the sense that I wish you were smarter. I can see a way of taking some of the really vacuous subject matter of this album and twisting it into something that is observationally funny and interesting and pokes fun at the way that these things are talked about and portrayed and sensationalized and romanticized in popular media. There's potential there. But to me, what's laughable about this album is that you think you're doing that. And if you're not trying to do that, if I'm reading this completely wrong, then it's even worse because you're just as bad as the thing you're supposedly satirizing. So, and then it ends with a song called The Loneliness, which is just the most boilerplate, stupid, end of album ballad, with the explosive choral vocals and just, emo whining about how much I want to die tonight because I'm so lonely and she doesn't love me. I got way angrier about this than I thought I was going to be. That might be the angriest I get in this video.
Well, this provocateur nonsense is just an excuse for artists to hide behind a thin layer of irony and talk down to their audience. And frankly, I would be less pissed off at these in a vacuum harmless attempts at provocation if it wasn't something that was happening fucking everywhere in music this decade. Like, we have had like 3 or 4 albums a year minimum that just feature people going on these screeds and these holier than thou tirades in their songs, and it's just so exhausting.
Everyone's divided, extreme right or extreme left, that's the only choice.
I already mentioned how bad and disheartening it is when an artist that shows potential squanders that potential wholeheartedly. It's even more dispiriting to see someone who has largely fulfilled their potential to a certain point and then proceeds to shit all over all of it. And this year, I don't think that this phenomenon has been better embodied than Polish progressive rock band Riverside. If you had told me 4 years ago, when I started listening to this band, that they would eventually make an album bad enough to place it into my bottom 5 of the year, not only would I have not believed you, it would be like you were speaking a different language for me. It's just like, what do you fucking mean? That doesn't make any sense. Like, precedent-wise, their albums, Riverside's 2003's Out of Myself, Second Life Syndrome, Rapid Eye Movement, Anno Domini High Definition, Shrine of New Generation Slaves, Love, Fear, and the Time Machine. All of these albums are not just great, they are excellent. All of them. I love this band by all accounts. And then in 2018, they came out with an album called Wasteland, which was a sparser, drier, drearier incarnation of their sound that didn't really animate me much, but I could still tell that they were trying to do something. And then they come back with 2023's amazingly titled ID.Entity. I won't lie and say that wasn't a red flag immediately, because it was. But I put this on, and I remember the gradual just descent, the plummet of my heart when I just began to realize how truly, truly terrible this album is. And mostly from a lyrical perspective. Look, I like to think that we've developed a high tolerance for cringy internet-based lyricism and whatnot, But in many respects, this is the tethered to this year's Peter Gabriel album, where all of its preoccupations on technology and modernity are being voiced concerns that aren't a result of any legitimate anxiety, but the result of a writer of a band just trying to talk down to their audience, and as well as leaning into some genuinely regressive political tendencies that I just frankly don't understand their place on a record like this. Every song on here is the most I read the cliff notes of George Orwell's 1984, and isn't it crazy how we're living in the shadow of Big Brother? Isn't it crazy to the point where we name a song on here Big Tech Brother? Which
Oh,
which would be the worst song on here if not for the absolutely unbearable 13 minutes of The Place Where I Belong, where you are mired in the electronic goopy sludge that is this album's production, where all of its worst, most annoying, most antagonistic, and most narcissistic tendencies show up over the course of the whole fucking thing. And you're just sitting there wondering, how the fuck did this band fall this far? And the thing is that this album isn't being received super duper well or anything, but by all accounts, it's being received decently. You go to that album's Rate Your Music page, and it is littered with comments about how fucking awful this album's lyricism is. And, you know, they're right. I agree with that. But what confounds me about this album is that nobody is talking about the music, which also sucks ass. Like, progressive rock is a bit nebulous these days. It's evolved, gone through so many stages at this point that really you're just taking influence from specific artists and that happens to fall under a specific genre umbrella, whatever. But this is very distinctly going for a like 80s Rush kind of synthwave blended thing here. And again, this podcast, we love us some 80s Rush, even 80s Rush that a lot of people don't like. I'm pretty sure everybody in here, to some extent, is ride or die for albums like Hold Your Fire. The problem is that this album does not sound as good as Hold Your Fire because of the lack of dynamics. Everything in this mix is just loud. It's all loud and it's all amorphous. It's all textureless. None of these instruments coalesce together in a way that feels complementary. None of them even seem to really find particular pockets in these mixes. They just kind of happen and all of it blurs together. And I'm wondering, what the fuck happened? 10 years ago, you were making albums that sounded infinitely better than this and taking inspiration from the same sources, and you were able to apply it more deftly. What the fuck happened here, guys? This is not just one of the worst albums of the year to me. It's one of the most squarely disappointing purely because of their back catalog and me holding them to a standard that I consider to be relatively high, even though their last record wasn't all that great. But nonetheless, it's insanely disheartening and just genuinely very like, you hear, no matter how great an artist is, they can sink to depths so low that they just kind of tarnish your affinity for them. And while I still really love the Riverside albums that I do, I can't say that I am going to be super encouraged to frequently revisit their great back catalog because of a record like this, because it just it smells, it's stinky. I want to stay away from it.
I love like that they did not only did they do a song, you know, making a Big Brother parallel, clap clap, well done, you're 10 years old, you've done it, you've understood literature, team. Not only have they done that, they've like not even like had the bones to stick to that metaphor. They've actually put tech in the title so that it's not even like, you don't even have to do the little bit of legwork to figure out what the metaphor represents in a modern context. They just tell you it's Big Tech Brother now.
Or my favorite song title on here, which is Post Truth.
Okay.
More like Post Cringe.
She was a light in the dark lullaby. That girl was raised by a butterfly.
Honestly, of the 5 albums we were talking about today, this was by far the least negative experience I had listening to a record. It's really bad. And there's a lot of things that are worth hating, but I can't deny the joy that this album's particular brand of stupidity has brought me. The common understanding of Our City was that, and of Fireflies in particular, was that okay, these guys are just like huge Postal Service fans, and they're just kind of updating that for the 2009 pop landscape. In some ways, it was a kind of surprise hit as well because there wasn't a huge amount of music that was like that. But it was obvious where they were pulling from and how they had kind of sharpened or I suppose dulled the edges of that influence to make it into something kind of more mass consumable. 14 years on and 5 albums later, would you believe that Owl City do not sound even a single bit different to how they sounded on Fireflies? You
How
could
reassuring.
easily believe that Fireflies was from this new album as much as it is from 14 years ago. This is a band who have resolutely and authoritatively refuse to evolve in any way, shape, or form. And look, I say that not with inherent condemnation, because honestly, I think that Adam Young, the frontman and really the whole personality of Our City, I think Adam Young understands what people liked about Fireflies and what made him successful with that song, and is also smart enough to know that he's not the kind of person who's going to benefit from trying to branch out too far from that and be a kind of ambitious capital A artist. He understands what he does well. That's me being charitable. And a less charitable reading could be that Adam Young doesn't know how to do any other kind of music and is scared to try because he has just mined this particular realm of eerie, fairy synth pop ever since. And Coco Moon is, oh boy, one of my favorite moments this year was listening to the third song on this album, Kelly Time, this carefully woven story of friendship between the character at the center of the song and this person from whom he's separated. Eventually, that these two people go through a particular hardship together and they become close and bonded, and then they become separated at sea, and it's this kind of heart-wrenching story. To be wrapped up into that and to then come to the slow and irrevocable realization that what Adam Young is doing here is retelling the entire plot of the Robert Zemeckis film Castaway from the perspective of the volleyball. That is a moment that, like, realizing what was happening, becoming fully cognizant, I'll never forget that experience. That's something Adam Young gave to me that I will take with me to the grave. The experience of listening to a story song from the perspective of a mysterious, unknown protagonist, and ultimately realizing that not only is that protagonist an inanimate object, it is the inanimate object called Wilson from the movie Castaway, and it's the whole story of the movie, to the point where the title of the song, Kelly Time, refers to Tom Hanks's character's wife in the movie, and it goes through the whole story, and it has this passage where one of the most unintentionally hilarious passages on any album this year, where, again, because the whole thing is from the first person perspective of the ball, right? So describing being out there on the lonely ocean, meeting a passing humpback whale, just like that it happened. The waves took me away, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that you lost a friend that day.
This is Chappelle's Pamela all over again.
It's this, and that's not even the funniest song on the album. The funniest song on the album has to go to Under the Circus Lights, which I guess would be the emblematic pick of the record that I would point to and say, if you want a taste of what this is,
This is the
check it
song
out.
you sent us. I've heard this.
Yeah, which is a song from the perspective of a young Adam Young visiting a circus as a very young child and falling in love with a trapeze artist. Oh, so grand and graceful, confetti rained as she climbed through the air like a homesick angel. And then the greatest line of the whole album, she makes heartache painful. What do you mean? Do you know what heartache is? It is not something that exists in a not painful state. It is an ache by definition. How can she make it painful? She could make it worse. She could make it different. She could make it, I don't know, excruciating. But it is, in any state, painful.
You might say that it is solely defined by this one quality.
And I get so caught up in that line that I forget it's a song about a 5-year-old boy falling in love with a circus performer and dreaming about her. I've gone this far as well without even getting to mention the fact that this is a deeply Christian album, which won't be all that surprising. Adam Young being Christian is not exactly like the twist at the end of The Sixth Sense. You can pretty much read the guy for filth from day one. I think this man believes in God. But it is a pronounced element of this record. And again, I'm not saying that's inherently bad, but I am saying that a lot of the moments where, okay, and here's the thing that might surprise you. For the most part, instrumentally, this is actually a pretty decently well-produced album. There are, like, it is not all that painful to listen to from a technical standpoint. Adam's vocals can be painful, and especially when there's processing put on them, which there often is, that can really grate. But I actually think that the general, synthesizer bed that he works with and the really kind of heavy, chunky effects on the guitar solos on this album are actually reasonably well done. And so the annoying thing about songs like Sons of Thunder or The Tornado, which are probably the two best songs on the album, is that as you're enjoying these occasional flashes of genuine muscle, you're greeted with the most weepily annoying, cringingly, don't lose hope because God will leave you home. He loves you to death. He'll make you fly in the twinkling of an eye. I'm trying to enjoy some genuinely, like, what I feel to be genuinely ambitious kind of structure to some of these songs. And you're making me listen to him talk about how God is like a piece of stardust in your eyeball and he's with you always and he'll make you fly. Listen to this. We're all too familiar with the fires of life, but we are resilient survivors, and one day we'll be free of nefarious schemes. What is
when
this
you say
writing?
nefarious schemes, I assume that he thinks the most evil person in the world is Dr. Doofenshmirtz. Like, that's the only way this makes any sense to
Of
me.
the cruel
Some
twists
fucking
of
Mojo
fate and
Jojo from
evil
Powerpuff
kings and
Girls.
queens, my man exists inside of a fairy tale. And this is really only becomes more pronounced on the album's longest song, the 6.5-minute Dinosaur Park, which is, as you might be able to predict, a song about imagining what if dinosaurs were real. But specifically, and this is the thing, right? Adam Young is a grown man. I don't think he's trying to make children's music specifically, but so many of his songs adopt a childlike perspective.
Dinosaurs were real. Does he know this?
But he's Christian, Morgan. Do you understand the point I'm making?
Hey, look. There's a lot of Christians
I'm
that
gonna
know that
sing
dinosaurs
a song about
existed.
how Jesus made the Velociraptor.
I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, and he's making it very difficult.
No, to be fair to him, he doesn't say, what if dinosaurs were real? That's me rewording it. As I was saying, I don't think he's trying to make explicitly music for children, but so many of these songs adopt a childlike perspective and are just really like babyish in the way that they're written and the way that they're expressed. And I don't get a weird vibe from it or anything. I'm not trying to say anything that he's like creepy or whatever. It's just like he is weirdly infantile. And like, again, some people fine, but it feels so, I don't know. Like it should be. I'm listening to the Wiggles or something with this song, where it's all about walking through the park, like being a kid and walking through the park, and there's like dinosaur, statues and stuff. Because the park is called Dinosaur Park, and there's dinosaurs, but he knows they're not real. He doesn't think they're real. They're just statues. But he's like, imagine if there was a little bit of magic dust that sprinkled over them one night, and then the dinosaurs came to life. I won't ever prove statues can move, but I'd like to think they do. So I make believe with all of my heart there's magic afoot, unseen in the dark in Dinosaur Park.
Can I just say that all this does is make me think of Jurassic Park, and it's the scene with the Brontosaurus, and then John Hammond walks towards the camera, and he's like, "Welcome to Jurassic Park." And I want this song in my head. Like, if this song is incomplete if it doesn't have "Welcome to Dinosaur Park."
And then it's like the meme version of that with the detune recorders going. It's what it feels like to listen to this again. 6.5 minutes of Dinosaur Park. Why is it so long? There's a point where he just starts saying states. And then there's a weird, like, Beach Boys-esque thing where there's a couple of songs about how much he loves the beach for some reason. If you go back and watch my earlier segment on this album earlier this year, I made a very grandiose spectacle of the song The Meadowlark, which is the moment where this album truly broke me. Because it's a song that's set in World War II, from the perspective of a soldier who is terrified. You know, he meets another soldier on the road, and the other soldier's his enemy, so he aims his gun at him and is prepared to shoot, and his sweat's running down his face, and they're both kind of, locked in combat together, waiting for the first person to budge so that they can get their shot off. And then suddenly a bird arrives and starts singing a song to them, and then you get the, oh my god, okay, it's going to be about how, the peace of nature disrupts the, man-made warfare and makes these people realize, how much more there is to life than fighting each other. But it's worse than that, because it's not just here's a bird to come along and remind everyone of the beauty of nature. It's that the bird starts speaking and says, "My son, if my disciple be, show grace and love to your enemy." The bird is Jesus. Jesus comes down from the sky to tell these soldiers to try giving peace a chance.
What else ought it be?
And literally, they put their guns down, hug each other. No, they don't do that. He kneels to his enemy on one knee. And then his enemy starts crying because of the fealty that he's being shown. And they realize that they're brothers. I don't know if that is supposed to be literal, probably not, but that would be amazing. And it's just basically a song that ends with the supposedly tear-jerking, connection between these two people, that they realize, while pointing guns to each other, because Jesus came down in the form of a bird. And you know what? This album might be a masterpiece.
The only word I can think of strong enough to communicate my feelings on Melanie Martinez's aesthetic as an artist is loathe. Everything about it is repulsive. It is this incessantly infantile, baby talk laden kind of just like the person who sings this is really into diaper fetishism or whatever. It's like, it's gross. I'm not being like provocative or going off on a like, no, listen to this.
So you're telling me
not.
that the song Light Shower is not about a shower of light?
Look, see, here's the thing about that is that on her 3 albums, this is one of the things about modern music that still perplexes me, is that there are some artists where I just don't understand how they have such, like, not only such wide fan bases, but such doggedly devoted fans of people, like stan culture and all that. Because it's like, I'm pretty sure I don't love any of my favorite bands or artists as much as these people love them, to the point where it's definitely unhealthy. But the fans of this, whatever they see in this, I'm not able to get on board with it. Like, anything theoretically, even a mild defense of most of this music and what it is, and it's Martinez, like, her obsession with childhood and simultaneously making everything really creepy and edgy and dark. Like, oh, look at this like play school pink aesthetic. But like, what if it was like secretly fucked up? Like, what if in this giant pink dollhouse there was like an abusive dad? And it's like that's her that's her whole thing. That's her whole thing. Like you have to hear it to know what I'm talking about, but I would never in a million years recommend anyone listen to any of these bafflingly unpleasant albums. Portals, to me, is not the weakest of the three. I'd still probably say that goes to 2019's K through 12, which is legitimately an album that I felt like I was like when I was done with this, I felt like is the FBI outside? Is someone watching me now? Because I feel like they should be. Like me being on a government watch list is an inevitability. Like I don't blame the United States government for doing that at all, frankly. I have other gripes to bear. But this Portals is so funny just because take a look at this album cover for a second. Does this look familiar? A little bit? Like maybe
I remembered this seeing this earlier in the year and thinking like, okay, what are you doing here? Like you're not even trying to look like you're not jacking Björk. Like what is the deal?
I mean, and it's not like her aesthetic on this album cover is reminiscent of something that Björk would do. No, look at the album cover of Fossora and then look at the album cover of Portals and tell me that shit isn't like if it
like
least
even the down to the mushrooms, right? That's not even a coincidence.
No, not at all. And like the weird way that the name is spelled and her being
and
all
she
weird.
has songs on here as well, like called things like Moon Cycle and Womb and shit. Like come on, what are you doing?
And that is the funniest thing about this album, because when it comes to the differences between this and the previous two records, there's none. No difference. There's no different, like it's the same minimal, dark, sort of alt poppy kind of stuff. Like there's nothing here in Portals to differentiate. It just has a bunch of like weird song titles and like the aesthetic appearance of trying to be different, clearly. And yes, these things don't actually matter when it comes to the music, but I just want to point out the inherent dishonesty of packaging and marketing an album like this, and then you listen to it and it's virtually identical to everything you've ever made before. I mean, it's basically Weezer reminiscent in a respect, except to an outlandishly parodic degree. But the real core of what's wrong with this, other than it being again, bafflingly uninteresting assembly of the most boring parts of 2010's pop music, because no, this isn't even updated or modernized to the 2020s. It sounds like this was made 10 years ago. But the lyricism on here, if there is anything I hate more than anything else in Martinez's music, it's her writing. And before I alluded to the fact that it's very kind of the faux edgy kind of surrealist play school thing, but it's secretly super dark. And it's like every single lyric of hers is some forced double entendre, some like weirdly wry kind of like slightly nudge wink wink, haha, do you get what I'm doing kind of thing. And in its pursuit to be clever and dark and weird and out there, it's just so like everybody knew somebody in high school who is just like who does the Jughead Jones, I'm weird, I'm a weirdo, I don't fit in, that's where I wear this stupid hat. That's this album. It is masquerading in the clothes of an outsider when on the inside there is nothing special about it whatsoever, except for the fact that so many of the songs here are darker and take an angle towards real life, and being that a lot of the songs on here are really fucking victim blaming. Martinez has been involved in some things that we won't discuss on this podcast right now, but let's just say that I'm not particularly a fan of when that kind of stuff really bleeds into your music very strongly. And that's basically the theme of the whole album on here, is just taking the idea of the victim or the accuser and taking them to task and, knocking them down a peg, because how dare they do anything or speak up for themselves or share their truth when mine is more important, because I am a deeply self-centered and narcissistic individual who does not care about anyone. And if you think I'm reading too much into this album, you haven't listened to it. it, because there is no other opinion to come to other than the person making this music is a contemptible human being. And I don't like veering off into personal accusations when we talk about the worst albums of the year, but this album makes no effort to delineate itself from reality. It's not the worst or the most incompetent, but I have never listened to an artist's music and felt worse for having done so than I have with Melanie Martinez, just because I was overwhelmingly curious. I knew nothing about her before this year. I had no clue how big she was. I've never encountered a Melanie Martinez fan in the wild or anything, but my God, I hope this stays on an island for the rest of forever, because frankly, this is like if you boiled and distilled Grimes to all of its cringiest, most toxic, blandest tropes and emblems, and it's a swamp of nothing. I hated listening to this. It is not the most incompetent thing I've heard this year, but if I could erase one of these albums from existence, I would unhesitatingly pick Portals.
I'm actually quite grateful that this is an album I have comparatively less to say about than the last two, because I went long on those last two. So I'm just going to be nice and brief with my next pick. It's the new album from the Danish pop band Lucas Graham. If you didn't know, Lucas Graham is not a person, it is a band. As Todd in the Shadows made very clear on his great video on their massive hit 7 Years from several years ago. You might remember that song. It's the one that goes, "What? I was 7 years old. My mama told me you're adopted." Lucas Graham have been around for over a decade, making waves outside of Denmark with that big song 7 Years, and I think 2015 or whenever that came out. And they're back. They came back earlier this year with their fourth album, Four, parentheses, the Pink album, because all of their albums have a different color palette, I guess, and this one's pink.
That's new.
It's like they can't decide whether to stick to a boring number format or a boring color format, and so they just do both. And that is so perfectly emblematic of the level of quality assurance, care, thought, passion that's put into this music, just as much as you get from the album titles, because this is such an empty, vacuous album. It is that typical brand of utterly whitewashed, gentrified pop soul that gestures vaguely towards, various influences from sort of American and traditional sort of black music, and just kind of completely homogenizes it into this fucking centrifuge of shiny plastic bullshit. As someone who likes to put on an album and experience music, it's insulting to listen to Lucas Graham on a deeply personal level.
Yeah.
There are things that Lucas Graham are trying to do on this album. I suppose there's a song that vaguely gestures towards trap called Wish You Were Here, not a Pink Floyd cover. This song does have a Khalid cosign. It's boring as shit. The only song that really stuck with me in any kind of memorable way on this album is the third track, This Is Me Letting You Go. And it's just because it has like some of the stupidest lyrics I've come across in preparing for this video. Again, like all of these songs are basically about the same thing, about, remember when we were young and things were so much easier, growing up is hard, the same kind of shit that 7 Years was about. But there's also this thread of how, easy it is to get your heart broken, how poorly and unhealthily Lucas Graham are handling their heartbreak. I try to fuck the issues away, make me doubt if I'm the only one. So this song is about someone who's Lucas, who's in love with someone. The relationship is really unhealthy. I would be insulting you if I attempted to explain this, because the idea that this can be explained is insulting. It suggests that there's some way in which you wouldn't understand this. You could be sitting right here with me. We could be talking babies, baby. Like it occurred to me looking back that what he means is that we could be talking about having children, but it just sounds like he means that he wants to be a baby
less of this next year.
If anything, Lucas Graham's given me more appreciation for what a versatile and thoughtful lyricist Ed Sheeran can be. Because genuinely, he tries. Not all the time, but more often than Lucas Graham do. I'm fearful of the day when I will have to say goodbye, because I'm the one supposed to keep those teardrops from your eyes. Every day with you has been the best day of my life. I'm sorry if I'm being sentimental tonight, but one by one, we all fade away. It's like as this album goes on,
Tangential.
you get this more and more of this portrait of someone who's like so desperately sad and unable to process their breakup that their writing just gets more and more like pitifully despondent, and not even in a relatable way where it's like, oh yeah, I've been through this spiral of sadness. I know what it's like. Just more, it's more and more like, dude, just even if you've been as heartbroken as Lucas Graham's supposedly is on this album, the way he sings about it just makes you want to just go fucking grow up, dude. Get your shit together. Move on. It's like, how am I supposed to listen to, oh, I've been fucking away the pain so much, when all the other songs speak about heartbreak like a fucking 6-year-old who's delayed discovering their object permanence. Like, it's just gaudy and stupid and asinine. You know, it's fitting that this has come back to back with Melanie Martinez because they're both artists who, you know, whether or not intentionally in the case of Lucas Graham, they just kind of are infantile. They're just really childish in their writing. And it makes you feel like, who is this for? Is it because it's not for adults, right? But if it's for children, then then it can't be for children because he talks about fucking the pain away. So who is the audience here? Like, I don't understand who Lucas Graham is for. I just knocked over my drink.
There's an old Lewis Black stand-up bit where he talks about the Democratic and Republican parties in the United States and says that the Democratic Party is the party of no ideas, and the Republican Party is the party of bad ideas. The same relationship that is going to be exemplified in my top 2 picks here. So let's go ahead and get the album of bad ideas out of the way. Saw this one coming from a mile away. Avenged Sevenfold's Life is But a Dream. If you are familiar with one of one of our roundup episodes where we blitz through a bunch of releases this year, you will remember or recall that Riley, Morgan, and myself were not particularly charitable to this album, in particular me, who I am deeply envious of the two of you, honestly, just because I do feel like there are things about this album that, in theory, could be perceived as likable. It is just that these things do not in any way work at all for me. And thus I am left with this catastrophic album. And the longer I've sat with this, the more upset my reaction has become. Because it's like I said when we reviewed it, is that I always want to encourage adventurousness or experimentation for any band, regardless as to whether or not they succeed. Because that's still showing that they're willing to push past their limitations, to break boundaries, artistically speaking, and that's things that we celebrate here on this podcast. But the reality of the situation with this Avenged Sevenfold album is that the ways in which it tries to break the rules are the safest possible ways that anyone could possibly perceive the idea of being out there or being weird or having no limitations. It is like a 15-year-old's idea of wacky, kooky, maniacal music is. And that they're doing nothing but cribbing ideas from bands like Mr. Bungle, bands like Ween, all of these bands that we've celebrated in the past because of their genuine eccentricity, because of their willingness to cast aside their audience expectations and just go ahead and make something. And that, at the end of the day, is what keeps Avenged Sevenfold's album from not being my number one, is that I still applaud their daringness of actually going about making a record like this, because it's they're like a weird butt rocky metalcore band, and they made an album where one of the songs sounds like a Daft Punk song, and they've got a piano ballad on here, and just like all kinds of different sort of avenues for experimentation. I just wish that any of these ideas were pulled off in a way I could deem skillful or enjoyable. Half of this album's problem, though, isn't even the experimentation. It's the fucking production. The guitars on this album are deliriously bad sounding. Like, there has not been a more cacophonous and just downright unpleasant song to listen to this year, for me anyway, than Nobody, purely because of the guitar tones. I mean, everything about that song is a fucking disaster, but the guitar tones specifically are just like, they are so dry, flat, amorphous, and weird sounding, but they're also like jagged and staticky, and they just feel like they're mired in a bog of white noise. It is so not fun to listen to. And that's the key here, is that an album like this should be fun. This band, who don't take themselves seriously, are, doing all this weirdo gonzo shit, and I should be having fun. Why am I not having any fun? Because this band is so preoccupied with trying to, again, they're trying to ape Mr. Bungle, where they're doing the weird sort of musical assembly of all these different influences, and they're also being ultra satirical and parodic. And we've gone on and on, since the show has began, talking about how satire is an exceptionally difficult thing to pull off in music these days. And we've had our limitations with artists who have excelled in that. But frankly, this is just some of the most toothless, boring, expected satire that I've ever seen. It's just like, oh, wow, you're really brave to make a song about how the Mattel Corporation is perhaps not the most ethical corporation in the history of America. Like, wow, really, really bold statement here. And that's basically everything, like, stab at something meaningful they attempt to go for. There are moments where they delve into more conceptual storytelling, which is where this album is at its best. But every single time this happens, the instrumentation will let it down in a spectacularly awful fashion. I mean, this album, from the start of it to about 9 songs, this is a wasteland. I find basically nothing redeemable about it. It ends on its 2 strongest moments, but even then, when you end on a nicely arranged sort of light piano ballad, I have to wonder where it's just like, yeah, this is the best executed thing on here, but by merit of the fact that it had the least amount of things that you could fuck up in it. So it's both an album I genuinely think is bad, but also spiritually doesn't sit right with me, because I feel bad that I don't enjoy it in some capacity. And not just like the capacity where I'm like, oh, 2.5 stars, fucking whatever, they tried. But no, I want to be able to say that. But when I listen to this, I'm just like, no, put it away. I can't do this more than once. I absolutely refuse. I'm glad I listened to this once just so I could say I gave it a shot. But after that, beyond the novelty of the experience, no.
Breaking news: Avenged Sevenfold makes a bad album. Ward 11.
I won't give up on you if you won't give up on me.
Macklemore would like you to know he is dead serious. To the point where the opening song on his new album, Ben, which is the latest in a long line of albums from any number of hip hop artists, where it's like, it's a serious album because it's just their first name.
And he's on the cover like this.
Yeah. But he would like you to know he's dead serious, because by the end of the first song on this record, he has all but pledged to run for office. I treat my city like it is my fam until the residency gets a building, man. Think I'm playing about mayor, but that is my plan. You know what 50,000 feels like when you question, is this real life? The money doesn't buy happiness. That's facts. Till you take what you made and decide to give it back like that. Macklemore would like you to know he is dead serious and also deeply committed to being a good person. There's an interesting friction on Macklemore's new album between Macklemore as this benevolent savior. This complex he's always kind of had, where with every modicum of success he's achieved, he is racked with this sense of I don't want to use the term imposter syndrome because I feel like that is overused a lot nowadays. It's kind of something that people just pull to whenever they feel like
It's
mildly
close,
guilty about
though.
their achievements. But Macklemore is certainly someone who has had this strange relationship with the success that he's found so easily by virtue of his homogeneity, his acceptability, his whiteness, obviously, in the world of hip hop, and also all the things that he is genuinely good at and talented at. So he's caught between a sense of accountability for that, and as he expresses in the song, a desire to give back, but also this deeply rooted need to be taken seriously as a rapper.
Mhm.
And this is so baked into this record in particular. Also, the last one he made, Gemini too, but it's really true here because this is Macklemore's most personal album. The strange tension between his desire to be seen as benevolent and selfless and giving, and also his need to drop hot bars about what a king he is. And I don't hold that against him. You know, you get into hip hop for some reason, that's one of the most fun and joyful things about it is how can I, and how can I big myself up in the most sort of, exciting and fun way possible? Like, how can I do that, right? And Macklemore is an artist who's had a lot of success, so he has a lot of things to brag about. So the album sets that dynamic up with the opening track Chant, which is like, this is my fight song, fucking us opener,
Uh-huh.
where he's like, it's serious because like the instrumental is kind of sparse and sort of heavy-handed when he's rapping, and he's rapping really, really fast and really, really intimately. And at some point he talks about one time when he overdosed, so it's for real. Again, not to make light of any of those things, but Macklemore just Macklemore ticks so many boxes in terms of like deeply serious, fight song anthem, I overcame my struggles ass thing. And then he has Tones and I come in to deliver the hook. And it's the most like, you can't take my voice from me. I'm a fighter. So what are you waiting for?
I would most certainly like to take Tones and I's voice away from them.
From this point, Macklemore attempts to tread a difficult line between the humorous levity of the much more irreverent comedy style he was initially known for, with this, attempt to, produce music that has a gravitas and like a technical skill in the rapping that can have him be taken seriously as an artist, as well as this third, string of shit where it's like, how can I make myself be seen as a serious human being who has like political and social potential to actuate change? Like, Macklemore's goals with this album are admirable, but they are so disparate and they're so sprawling and they are so misaligned with each other that it is an absolute garbage fire watching him attempt to pull any of them off. He's pushing himself in so many different directions in terms of what he wants to do for his persona with this album that he ends up achieving absolutely none of them. And the most disappointing part is that the one thing I found Macklemore most enjoyable for in the past, which is his playfulness and his sense of humor, that thing is, I think the thing he most flames out on here and the thing that he tries the least with. And that's a real shame. A song like Day You Die, where there's actually a few songs in this record where Macklemore starts with a comic premise, and then by the end of the song, he's got into this weirdly existentially dark place that's not funny at all. And it's like he's trying to balance his ability to kind of conjure these amusing, humorous situations and describe things in a funny way with his desire to make serious songs about real subject matter. And look, there are some songs on this album where Macklemore commits to the serious subject matter in a way that I think does, it creates some genuinely moving stuff, like the song Tears, for instance. I think that genuinely is there's some pretty powerful
Yeah.
storytelling on that song. But for the most part, you have songs like Day You Die, where he's sort of, it's this classic premise of, if you knew when you were going to die, what would you do? How would you like change your life so as to, live better and all that kind of stuff? Acknowledge all the mistakes that you've made, make the most of the time you have left, and sort of building up this sort of inspirational song about kind of having a sense of awareness and gratefulness. And then it turns into this weird thing where he decides that because he knows when he's going to die, he's going to rob a bank and like go crazy, run that motherfucking tab, tell the teller fill the bag, fuck a mask, I'm gonna throw all this cash on the ab, like give his car away to a stranger, and then just basically walk into the ocean. It's such a tonally strange song. It's like, yeah, be grateful for what you've got, man. I'm gonna go fucking crazy.
I was about to say, it's just like, be grateful for what you have. Also, kill yourself, my man.
It's like, no, it's genuinely like someone who's genuinely trying to impart that not wisdom, but is coming at it from a place of like, I fucked shit up so bad that there's no hope for me. So do learn from my mistakes. But again, it's just that song. There's no other, the other songs on the record don't really like feel congruent with that. You of course have probably the most notorious aspect of this record, which is Macklemore's worst tendencies, which always come to the fore when he's trying to establish credibility for himself in the
Yeah.
hip hop world. And so, of course, you have a song like Heroes, where Macklemore needs you to know that he was listening to real hardcore hip hop when he was in school. Like he was a real head from a young age. And of course, one of the ways in which he does this is he gets DJ Premier on the track. There's a Biggie sample, and he talks about how all of his heroes died of overdosing while riding for the culture. My heroes shot dope and inhaled blow in their noses, got locked up, got out, and did some more shit. And of course, the problem here being that Macklemore defines these great artists whose skill and achievements he loves so much by all of this criminal activity and stereotypical drug abuse, as opposed to by the technical things they achieved and the artistry that they had. It's really, and I do think it's really unintentionally insulting, and it diminishes and devalues the point he's trying to make, but also just makes his own credibility look incredibly gone, just shot completely down the drain. One of the most cloying and irritating songs on this album, Lost, where he talks about, this is his song about the social media age and about how we're all self-obsessed. And what's interesting is that it comes off of the back of one of the more interesting songs on the record, I Need, which is this kind of like which is a song where he's talking about the dangers of glamorizing a volatile drug and capitalist obsessed lifestyle. He walks you through all these cliches about, rich rappers who get obsessed with needing bitches and weed and all these things, and then end up kind of descending into paranoia. Basically, he tells the story of Scarface, but in the context of like rap celebrity. And he does I think he does an interesting job. It's very heavy-handed and very obvious what he's doing. He does an interesting job of kind of like tying the dangers of like taking all of this, braggadocio shit too seriously and getting completely, consumed in that rabbit hole to the point where you're, isolated and lonely and paranoid and suicidal. And then he leads off the next song, Lost, with a lyric about he's wondering what celebrities will tweet RIP when it's announced that he's dead on TMZ. Again, coming from Macklemore, it feels very like overbearing, because you don't really get a sense of him being someone who exists in a life that has much danger. But maybe that's just a misperception. Maybe he is someone who struggles a lot and genuinely is concerned with his mortality. But then as this song goes in, it stops being an interesting extension of Macklemore's pondering of what happens when you fall into the rabbit hole of celebrity life and isolate yourself. It stops being about that and starts being about how all these girls I'm dating keep looking at their phones, and all my fans at my shows are looking through the screen, and we all need to compete for airtime with advertisements. Tag me so I can be happy. Get a follow, guys. Like and subscribe. I need some influencers on TikTok, you bitch. I made a whole ass album. I worked hard on it. 15 tracks. We don't last 15 seconds. We got ADD. And it's past that. We exit. We just stare at memes, laugh, and we hit the next one. And our self-esteem is so messed up and threatened by other people's memes and their perceived successes. The likes aren't hitting us like they used to. Texting while I'm... And what's interesting about this is that he is like doing all this shit, like he's painting all this picture of how vacuous and consumed we are with our technology and how it's kind of robbing us with the level of appreciation of the real world. But just because of the way Macklemore has presented himself on this album, what this song really plays like is just Macklemore's own feeling of people aren't paying enough attention to him. Like, people are too obsessed with their phones around him. People are not listening to his album because they want to get on to the next thing. They're not, and it's just like the point you're trying to make is so diluted by the way it always reverts back to your, material success and how this technological fixation is affecting your ability to be materially successful. You really need a news crew just to trend on YouTube.
Not how
What?
YouTube works, but okay. That's
Like,
literally
I don't
the
know
opposite.
what he was trying to say there, like what point he was trying to make with that particular line, but it really made me laugh. And then, of course, by the end of the song, he's gone so far into this rabbit hole that the hook is just scroll, refresh, turn it off, do it again. Scroll, refresh, turn it off, do it again. That's the dance now. And he's like, oh, we have TikTok dances, but the real TikTok dance is how we scroll on our phones. I'm like, dude, okay.
I'm gonna kill myself.
Ever since he won that fucking Grammy over Kendrick, he has been this guy who has just been flagellating himself in front of people so that he can atone for all of these perceived wrongs that have nothing to fucking do with him. And it's infecting every level of his artistry to the point where he's come back with this album long past his point of relevancy and is like, here's how I'm going to insert myself into the modern canon of hip hop. And he does this. He does this with songs like my least favorite song on here, which is Grime. I fucking hate this song.
Bro needs to gentrify as many different hip hop subcultures as he can.
I'm an alley cat, some say, a dirty rat. On my side is my gat, but I'm lying about that. Still bumping my buckshot, trench coat, and all matte black. Hat with curls banging right out the back. Facts, I dive in, open eyelids, fuck a silence, big pharma, rest in piss, and get the Heisman. Real good, fucking lyrical, miracle, spiritual, empirical, whatever the fuck. But then we get to the actual, like, what is this song about? Ain't they got a clue that these ain't real diamonds? Don't turn me back to the old me, backpack rapping and battling back in Ollie. I was studying the Carter 1 right after 03. Marinara, brick oven on the terrace with the goat cheese. What? You flatbread from Panera, don't approach me. What? Coasting. David Blaine on that beat. What? OGs don't make a motherfucker OD. That outfit, that's a no for me. If you're going to do drugs, I can suggest some, but I wouldn't spend that much of your money on codeine. I ain't judging. Enjoy your life, but that shit is killing people, and it's overpriced. Hit the club, get the bag, man. I know that's right, but let me teach you young bloods how to hold the mic.
That codeine line is such a perfect encapsulation of his problem, which is this, like,
you all need to buy better drugs. Shut the fuck up.
It's this sense which, like, he wants to be this sort of, figure of inspiration and kind of like who can lift up his community, right? But he can't get past his own condescension towards basically everyone under him.
Teacher. Man, he's got to bestow the younger generation with his knowledge. Dude, if you need to forcibly insert yourself into the canon of hip-hop, there is no lesson you should be teaching the younger generation of rappers. I promise you that fucking Jid is fine without Macklemore.
Like even saying Jid's name in the same sentence as Macklemore makes you want to throw the fuck up. Like Jesus Christ.
See, that's the thing though, is that that's implicitly what Macklemore is saying on here, is that he's trying to offer all this fucking advice and it all comes across as condescending, where it's just like, dude, it's not even that the pupils have surpassed the master. You were never the master. You weren't even the substitute teacher. Why do you think that you have the fucking like gall and experience to talk down to these people who are like artistically surpassed you in droves? And I feel like a decade ago you knew that. What happened?
This is a man who at every point has stumbled over himself to apologize for inserting himself into the upper echelons of hip hop success in the brief period that he had it. Yet also at the same time is utterly determined to prove himself worthy of that, and says things like, "I'm on grandma's cornbread flow."
Okay, that's that is awesome that he said that.
If that was the whole album, we wouldn't be talking about this right now. Like honestly, it's just like, so Macklemore drops some corny bars. What else is new? I kind of like that about him, but it's like,
Man, look, you can make a viable career out of being a fucking goober. You just gotta commit to that.
Yeah.
the entire
does
second
have,
half
like-
of Eminem's career is nothing but
He
that.
has like this tendency as well on his inspirational songs to lean towards like these really exaggerated versions of like modern day therapy speak. And it results in some really funny moments where he says things like, "Put everything you got into your truth."
Shut up, man.
That shit just makes me roll. So yeah, Macklemore, I mean, thank you. Next, let's move on.
We like to have fun here at Jams and Tea. We make these little roasting sessions into a bit of a cherished event. We have a good time with them, even though we get a little angry sometimes, but we know how to rein in our anger. So when trying to think about what angle to attack this with, because I mean, I've already mentioned the album before in a proper segment, I was just kind of like, what do I even do for this? Because this is the kind of album that you pray something worse comes along so that it takes your number one spot, so that you have something interesting to say about it, so that you can glean an insight or have a unique perspective on it. All of that is out the door for me here. Todd in the Shadows, when he does his worst and best list, he says that the worst things are not the things with the most bad, but with the least good. And there is no album I listened to this year that had less good in it than Greta Van Fleet's Starcatcher. I was dumbfounded by how little I had to say about any of this. Because if you look at this on a technical level, if you compare this against all the other albums that I just listed, and hell, all of the other ones that Riley just listed, purely from a musicianship standpoint, this comes out pretty much ahead of everything I think we've talked about. Like, if you're talking about music in a purely evaluative sense, this is light years ahead of ID.Entity or One Thing at a Time or Portals or Life is But a Dream. But it also has nothing. Look at that fucking album cover, man. Look at how much of a nothing it is. I mean, it may as well be a fucking blank space. It's something like vague and opaque, and you can't tell what it is. And that's exactly what the album is. When people say that they don't like Greta Van Fleet because they are Led Zeppelin and Rush worshippers with nothing else in there, I feel like a lot of Greta Van Fleet fans who I have seen over the course of the last couple of years online get really frustrated that this is the only metric critics seem to judge this band and their music by. And I understand that on some level, but there's nothing I can say about this that will be in any way illuminating to those people. If you like this album, I can't present to you a defense beyond, I don't think that this brings anything to the table that any band that they draw from haven't done before. Like, yeah, this sounds a little bit more like 70s Rush than earlier Greta Van Fleet stuff does. And I mean, that's fine. I love Rush. But at the same time, when you bring these weak ass melodies, this dry, stale, cracker left out in the sun for 2 weeks ass production, these riffs that feel so bog standard, songwriting that doesn't even feel like songwriting. It feels like a vague collage of ideas that past rock bands have explored, where you're singing about like these fantastical concepts and the warrior that fought the lion in the battle. That, like, I don't believe for a second that these people want to be making music or writing songs, because everything they do is so colossally uninspired. For the same reason that people who are fans of this band are frustrated with critics for not being able to engage with their music meaningfully, I'm also frustrated because I feel like if they gave the music that inspired this a shot, there would be no reason to listen to this. The reason this is the worst album of the year for me is because it's the most useless thing I've listened to this decade so far. I can think of no reason for this to hypothetically exist. And I'm not trying to insult it when I say that. I mean it. Like, as a person, as a critic, I have tried for months to think as to what purpose this album and Greta Van Fleet serve. And other than appeasing boomers who have worn out their vinyl of Led Zeppelin 4 by this point, I've got nothing, man. The lead singer of this band just sounds like Geddy Lee, but more annoying, more scratchy. He doesn't have a vocal presence that imbues any sense of power or weight in anything. There's a complete lack of dynamics on this album that, if you take away the vocals and stuff, the instrumentation is just as boring and competently assembled. I have come to like an existential crisis with this band and with this record because I don't know what to do with any of it. I'm just like, what the no matter, it goes to show you that no matter how bad, how offensive a piece of art can be to your sensibilities, how much you are deeply repelled by an experience that like evokes something primal in you that you hate with every fiber of your being nothing is always worse than that. Always. It's why it's the boring versus bad debate that we come back to all the time. And more often than not, we do kind of play devil's advocate for saying something, well, yeah, something might be boring, but it's still, competent and all that. But it's just like, what do you do when that competency is nothing but artifice, when there's no emotion that you can feel behind it? It's the most depressed an album has made me this year. Like, before it was Life Was But a Dream, because I was just like trying to reckon with, it's just like, I feel really bad that I can't appreciate what these guys are bringing to the table, but I can't appreciate what these guys bring to the table because the table is fucking empty. It's a tablecloth. Am I supposed to just chew on the tablecloth? It's not fucking edible. I'm gonna die. Ah!
Why don't we re-record?
Knowledge can be a great source of comfort in life. I'm sorry, I'll read that again. Clarity can be a great source of comfort in life. I'm sorry, I'll read that again. Sureness can be a great source of comfort in life. I'm sorry, I'll read it again. Surety can be a great source of comfort in life. I'm sorry, I'll read that again. Certainty can be a great source of comfort in life. Some things carry the relieving weight of certainty. We will all die. We need oxygen to breathe. We need to consume food, nutrients, and we need to excrete waste. We need to drink water. Water is a compound that is 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen. These are things that we know. The sky is not blue per se because blue isn't real. It's the color spectrum. There are 8 planets in our solar system and many other smaller bodies. Entropy exists. The Dark Side of the Moon Redux by Roger Waters is the biggest piece of shit to come out in 2023. It is great to have universal truths like all of these that we can accept and understand as a bedrock for our way of approaching the universe and finding our place in it and understanding what our purpose is. I'm so grateful in some respects, to have this album, to have this reimagined, redux version of Dark Side of the Moon from one of its chief creators, because it affirms so many different things, that some of which I didn't even know I needed reaffirming. For one, it reaffirms that The Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd, which is a completely different album to this, let me be clear, is a great record, a classic that's enduring and deserving of its status. Because there's a lot of conversations around that album. It's one of the most celebrated albums of all time. It's understandable that often conversations of its overratedness come up, because of course they are. It's that big of an album. But it was great to listen to this and then go back and listen to that and remember that that is what good music sounds like. And this is a vanity project that does not even have the benefit of being interesting in a narrative sense or in a meta sense as a commentary on the work. No, and you might be surprised to hear that, because when you learn that Roger Waters' Dark Side of the Moon Redux is not just a re-recording of the Dark Side of the Moon, but an excuse for him to spout these essays on dreams that he's had, random thoughts running through his brain, you might think, at the very least, that from these you might get some kind of meaningful reflection on what the album means to him 50 years from its release. You would think that, surely, at the very least, if you were going to get these milquetoast Dark Side of the Moon fucking, instrumental retreads that sap 80% of the instrumental vitality out of the original, you would think that a record like that with these long essays spoken by Roger himself would at least give you some kind of insight into Roger's relationship with the album. You'd think that not just because of what it is, but also because Roger himself has said that was the point of the project, right? Because it came about as he was in quarantine, trying to make music, put a record together, and it came to him that, oh, why don't I, it's 50th anniversary of Dark Side of the Moon's coming up. Let's go back and think about that record now, 50 years on. What does it mean to me? Where am I at now? There's nothing enlightening about experiencing Roger Waters' The Dark Side of the Moon Redux. It does not do anything to deepen your understanding or appreciation for the original record, other than to reaffirm that if you go back and revisit it, it's a great album, which you don't really need this record to be reminded of, because you can go back and revisit it anytime. At the very least, it gives you an excuse to remember, oh yeah, that's an album. I might go back and listen to that. Oh yeah, here I am listening to it. It's a great album. That's awesome. But I didn't need this to remember that. And I sure as shit didn't need to hear Roger waxing lyrical in this particularly unnecessarily abstract poetic style he has, that obfuscates the things he's trying to communicate, not as a means of poetic license to kind of create something with different interpretations or possibly different meanings, but just to be awkward and elliptical and difficult to understand. And to strip this original album of so much of its identity. One thing about it, like I said, is that it reminds you the original record's a great album, but it also, the reason why it reminds you that is because you listen to this and you think, I need to go back and listen to that to see if it is still a great album, because listening to this makes you doubt that while you're experiencing it. It makes you think, is The Dark Side of the Moon really as great as I remember it being? Because this is like fucking Tylenol. This is just a complete fucking knockout. This is a total snoozer. This will make you fall asleep and sleep through your alarm clock. This will make you fall asleep and dream the dreams that Roger Waters is describing in his fucking screed on Money, and then wake up wishing you were dead.
So back when this project was announced, I said to myself and to others, I believe, I will die before I listen to this. Here's the thing, is that I did try to listen to this, and I made it to about So it was at some point through, yeah, it was on the run where I was really like, okay. And then when we got to time, I was officially like, no, it's not that I couldn't listen to it anymore. I could have finished that listen. It wasn't so painful as to completely eschew my ear. It was it's appropriate that the fact that the song Time in fact caused this realization is that we only have so much time on this earth, and I'm spending that time in a year in particular where I'd fallen so far behind on quality releases. I'm spending this time listening to Roger Waters' cover album of Dark Side of the no, I'm no. So I instead took that time to listen to something that was worth the fucking data that passes from my phone to my Bluetooth headphones. When I think of modern metal, it's easy to think of bands like I know Tesseract had a really good album this year that I haven't finished yet, and like Periphery, or even if you want to get particularly modern with it, bands like Sleep Token or Polyphia. Those are bands that come up often when people say the words modern metal, or discuss it in the context of like what is the most contemporary stuff out there. But after listening to this album in particular, the band that I think of when I think of modern metal is in fact Pupil Slicer and their album Blossom, which I had not made time for back when it came out. This is a truly excellent album. It's and genuinely progressive in terms of the musical construction going on here. And it's one of the things you could say about it, and is often most often remarked, is that how ambitious it is within the realm of hardcore. And I wholeheartedly emphasize that, particularly on the song that's called the song at Creation's End or No Temple. These are moments I think in hardcore music recently which genuinely look forward, unlike groups like Polyphia, which I will in fact outright diss, because just because you can make a trap metal song does not mean that you ever, ever should. Tim Henson is way too talented to be wasting his time with this nonsense. Get a grip. It's impossible for me, as someone who loves the Dillinger Escape Plan as much as I do, to compare almost every math and metalcore band that I hear in some way to them. So it's genuinely heartening to hear that while I never connect to it in a way that I do with Dillinger, that there's something still being made within this generation that carries on that spirit of thrusting hardcore furiously kicking and screaming into the future. And it's nice that Pupil Slicer is around to do things like that. Thank you, Roger Waters. Please retire.
In 1995, Kazuya Turamaki, Hiroyuki Ishido, and Hideaki Anno collaborated on this show. You might have heard of it.
This, dude?
I've got a point. Trust me.
I know.
Little show. Made a heard of it. It's called Evangelion. We have talked about that show on this channel before.
It's the worst film ever released.
Specifically August, Jen, and myself, and one of my favorite things we've ever made, which is the review of 3.0 plus 1.0. But in 1995, the original Evangelion show was created and then followed up with by the end of Evangelion. And then in the late 2000s and 2010s, there were the rebuild films, which attempted to condense the plot of the show into feature films that eventually became their own thing. And one point that August, Jen, and myself honed in on with Evangelion at the end is that the most objectionable thing about the rebuild movies in particular is that it is one artist, one writer, one director taking a fundamentally collaborative piece of art, something that many, many, many people worked on, taking that, recontextualizing it, repurposing it, and putting your name on it, and then going off into a different direction with the final two films. Now, what this does effectively is these rebuild movies serve to encapsulate the core of the show. Except the problem is with those things is that what you're communicating to your audience on an artistic level is the aspects of this piece of art that I didn't work on are not important because they don't matter right now. This is for me. I'm making this. This is a vanity project. This is an ego project. That's what this is. And in some respects, those things are fine. But when these things exist as nothing but a cynical refutation of the art of collaboration, that's when you go into some very sketchy territory. And again, it's not outright the thing that makes it objectionable on an artistic level. But repackaging it and then trying to distill this cynical, myopic skeleton of a former project and selling that to people, but also simultaneously using it as an excuse to be so regressive, spiritually speaking, and having that be the definitive statement, the way you cap it all off. Like, this is my grand statement as an artist. This is how I'm going to take something that has been beloved for years by an entire generation of people, something that means so much and has influenced so many things that its overall impact is fundamentally incalculable. Taking that and then just turning it into something, alienating it, mutating it into this twisted clone of itself, where all it does is serve a purpose that you, the creator who has repackaged all of this, want it to serve. Rather than, I don't know, you just being a creative and making something new, there's a dogged refusal to just let the past die. Not even let the past die, to let the past exist as it is, because it's not going to change. It's one of the most fundamental things about the human experience is the past and you can't do anything about it. Whereas here you have Roger Waters excavating the skeleton of Dark Side of the Moon, making this fucking preachy spoken word slowcore ass edition of this and being like, this is the definitive version. This is what I was trying to say with this. This is my vision. And just subtextually kind of shitting all over the contributions of your fellow bandmates, which, I mean, I get it. That's way more of an issue here. But the thing is, with Evangelion and Hideaki Anno, I still have a fundamental level of respect for the man because he isn't outright hostile towards the names which he erased when making his new thing, right? Like, I'm still going to object to it on a fundamental level in that I don't think it should exist. And I don't say that about a lot of works of art I don't like. This, on the other hand, not only is it the same thing spiritually, but it is also just a monument to two old men's shitty feud. You can't convince me that any of the pretentious screeds on here, regardless of whether or not it's the original lyrics or things that Roger added in, you can't convince me a word of this shit is sincere. He doesn't mean jack shit. Let's not all kid ourselves. Roger Waters knows exactly what he's doing, and he's just doing this to satiate his own ego and stick it to his former bandmates that he is still feuding with to this day. And I'm not saying that feud is even entirely his fault. Everybody in Pink Floyd, for the record, seems like they're a bit of a jackass now. But still, he is the only one actively attempting to undermining their legacy. And look, I'm not offended by that because the legacy of Pink Floyd is so cemented that, I mean, it's like the fucking Beatles. It's like when that new Beatles song came out. It's like, there is nothing that is going to tarnish the legacy of the Beatles. Even if you think that song is terrible and like spiritually you object to its existence being made and the way in which it was made, it's still not going to do anything to their legacy, and this isn't going to do anything either. But the mere fact that this exists out of nothing but spite, I mean, fuck me. The Evangelion Rebuild movies are some of my least favorite pieces of art I've ever experienced, but fundamentally, God, at least I can give them the benefit of the doubt. I can't give Roger Waters the benefit of the doubt here. This is all bullshit. There's no way. I am not naive enough to be like, oh yeah, this is definitely an earnest attempt to make up for what he originally viewed as a compromised vision. This is nothing but petty grievances in artistic form. And frankly, Morgan, the fact that you decided to ditch it and go for something better and frankly more forward-looking and innovative brings great joy to me, because the only reason this has to exist definitively is so you can point at it, look at it, and say, I don't have to waste my time with that. And frankly, there is nothing that makes me more cynical than something like that.
For clarity, I don't think it's so much Roger said as much that it's him kind of trying to want to correct the mistakes of the previous record, as much as it's just him commenting on his weird relationship with it. But the reason I'm so cynical about it, and this does tie into what you're saying, is that this exists so that people will listen to it. Like, if Roger wanted to reflect on the legacy of the Dark Side of the Moon, there are any number of ways that he could do that. But enticing people to listening to his vague ramblings by promising a reimagined or commentated or re-envisioned version of an album they love is a deeply cynical thing to do. And it doesn't matter even if Roger was genuinely doing it purely as, something for him. The fact of the matter is, it exists in the form it does. It promises something by virtue of its very existence, and it doesn't reward that. Like, it doesn't even, I think, provide interesting insights into Roger's state of mind, because it's so difficult to decipher and so tangential to anything related to the original record. It really just feels like we've all been conned into listening to a Roger Waters spoken word album by the dangling carrot of this magnificent record that everyone loves. It's such a despicable thing to do, honestly. And I say that as someone who really emphasizes, artistic freedom and the right of artists to, do things like comment on their previous works and reimagine them and do whatever they want with it. But as I said at the start, like, this doesn't offer anything new. It doesn't add anything to your experience or understanding of Dark Side of the Moon. At least it doesn't for me, and it certainly doesn't seem to for you either. It doesn't provide any actual new interesting information or context. It is just a cheap, cynical ploy for attention. And maybe that's not how it's intended. But the point is that is the experience that I've had with the multiple times I have listened to this to try and glean something, more artistically, forthcoming from Roger, and try to really give him the benefit of the doubt. It just doesn't do it. It is a hoodwink. We have all been hoodwinked into listening to Roger Waters' Dream Diary by the promise of a instrumental reimagining of an album that doesn't even do a good job of instrumentally reimagining the album. It just is a failure on all fronts. Let us know what you think of our picks for the worst albums of 2023. Let us know what you would pick for your least favorite albums of 2023. If you think there are any particular stinkers that have gone unrepresented, let us know in the comments below so we can continue the conversation. We will be back again very soon with some much more positive reflections on the year that was. We're excited to get into our favorite songs and albums, and we hope you'll join us for that as well. Until next time, though, folks, rock over London, rock on Chicago, McDonald's. I am loving it.